10 years ago, I became deeply involved in the internet and subsequently into fashion. Like many 13-year-old girls, I was a dedicated member of stan culture. From music artists to TV shows to the legion of British YouTubers that ran the internet, I was fully in. For the first time, I finally felt that I had found a community of people that I actually aligned myself with instead of what I was just expected to be involved with in school. And being a part of these circles online, I wanted to match what I was viewing. I was no longer wearing clothes where the only thing I had in mind was what the other girls in school were wearing, but instead I was curating a very specific uniform that would reflect my interests and also signal to those around me who had similar interests that I was in their community. Fashion serves as a universal language that facilitates social connection and belonging. When individuals align their style preferences with prevailing fashion trends or subcultural movements, they signal their affiliation with particular social groups or community. Thankfully, I'm no longer 13 anymore, and I've expanded my style and sense of self over the past 10 years, but I wanted to deep dive into the history of a lot of the trends that we experienced over the past 10 years, the intersection of fashion and culture, and also just how fashion impacted me in my personal life. Obviously, I cannot cover everything, but trust me, we're going to hit a lot of topics. Like, a lot of stuff happens in 10 years, so be kind with me if I don't touch on certain fashion trends that you liked and participated in, or you think I got some information wrong. I did do research, okay? This is a research-based video, but if you disagree with me, just let me know in the comments. Don't be a dick if I don't cover the topic that you wanted me to. But let's start our deep dive with 2014, the Tumblr aesthetic. Coming off of the early 2000s, where we were seeing a lot of bold colors, crazy patterns, statement pieces, it was time to be out with the old and in with the new, neutral tones, and minimalism. To begin to understand 2014, we actually have to go all the way back to the 90s. The 90s began with economic downturn. A lot of people were less interested in the maximalism that we saw in the 80s, and opting instead for a more minimalistic style, looking towards secondhand fashion and vintage to really curate their aesthetic at the time. Along with hip-hop and alternative music being the most popular things at the time, this made it the perfect storm for the grunge style to take hold of teenagers and fashion designers alike. But let's fast forward to 2014. The 90s were a nostalgic time for the 20-somethings that were running the spaces on the internet and in fashion, and the new teens of 2014 latched onto this nostalgia even if they weren't even alive to experience it firsthand. Rebellion and nonconformity were in the air, and as an old wise man once said, "Normal people scare me." There were a lot of trends in clothes that contributed to what we think of now as the 2014 Tumblr aesthetic, but I want to talk about a few big players that really made this era what it was. The graphic tee has really been a key element in a lot of young people's personal style throughout history. The tee allows everyone around them to know exactly what music they're into, what values they may align with, and also just how hardcore into a community they really are. In many ways, the music t-shirt was the perfect garment to accompany the fledgling teen, merging music and fashion in a simple, utilitarian way that helped forge group identity. With thrifting on the rise in 2014, band tees from generations before littered the thrift store that these new teens are now at, giving them the opportunity to find vintage clothes that are reminiscent of the 90s, and maybe even finding a band that they can really enjoy themselves. Thinking of the graphic tee now, that will always remind me of the exaggerated, extremely hostile argument that is, name 3 songs if you were wearing a graphic tee, specifically a band tee. While I do understand the argument that if a person is wearing a band tee, they should actually like the band to align with their true personal style and to really wear it authentically. However, in 2014 compared to the 90s, I think it was less about what the actual shirt was promoting, but instead more so about aligning themselves to the communities that these bands were tied to. So to kind of dissect this idea, I was a young girl in 2014. I was 13 years old. I really enjoyed a lot of American rock bands such as like Fall Out Boy and All Time Low. These bands were often seen wearing graphic tee of Gorillaz or Metallica, so being a fan, I also wanted to wear these shirts. So maybe while I wasn't necessarily into Gorillaz or Metallica, I was more so wearing the shirt to mimic the bands that I were actually into. Does that make me a poser? Yeah. Probably. But I wasn't really trying to connect to the 40-year-old men who would have actually been at the concerts way back when these bands started, but instead I was trying to connect with the other poser 13-year-old girls. And honestly, I don't see that much wrong with that. One of the next key elements that we're going to get into is the skinny jean. Even if you weren't really in a specific subgenre of the internet, odds are in 2014 you were wearing skinny jeans. While skinny jeans had been the norm for a lot of the 2000s to the 2010s, when I wasn't forced to wear my school clothing, I was definitely trying to emulate the grunge style with my black skinny jeans. In recent history, skinny jeans were mostly inspired from bands of the 80s like Guns N' Roses and Bon Jovi. These groups in turn influenced a lot of bands of the 2010s who wanted to align themselves with more of an edgy persona. Also, the internet humor at the time was very nihilistic and self-deprecating. Everyone kind of wanted to give themselves an emo edge. So if you wanted to fit in, you kind of had to hate yourself like a little. And this dark, depressing humor was often reflected in dark, depressing fashion. Shifting away from the Tumblr aesthetic for a second, I just want to talk about how skinny jeans were just like ruling everyone's world in 2014. Being a staple in pretty much every woman's closet, the skinny jean was like a sleek look that you could use to just have the rest of your outfit really outshine your pants. Like pants were like a thing because they were always going to be skinny jeans. Growing into my teens at the time, I think I was just craving my own form of rebellion. Going to a Catholic middle school, I was forced to be very plain and simple, so whenever I wasn't at school, I wanted to be anything but that. These online communities at the time really helped me find community with people that also had similar music taste or humor taste, and who also felt like they were stuck in an environment that didn't really suit them. I was unironically believing that I literally was just born in the wrong generation. 2015. Every printed pattern ever and the high-waisted jean. In 2015, every day just sort of felt like summer, at least when it came to fashion. I traded in my flannels for some boho fashion and loose, messy buns. While I still held the 2014 grunge aesthetic close to heart, it was the year of pastel, and I wanted to fit in accordingly. When it came to the internet, we were beginning to see the shift away from the nihilistic humor of 2014, so instead of like, I hate myself when I want to die, we turned more to pizza is bae. It was no longer about wanting to be invisible, but instead being a carefree wild child. So in 2015, skinny jeans were out, but like only sort of. High-waisted jeans and the mom jeans were really taking hold this year. I don't think it was possible to find a pair of pants from this era that was not high-waisted, and I was completely okay with that. Being 14 at the time, I was not opposed to keeping my lower stomach covered, and it definitely helped with my body image. While in 2015, it's not like fat phobia just went away, but the high-waisted jean was a great ally to the body positivity movement. In a 2015 article by Lily Fallon in Virility, she writes, both the style of high-waisted jeans and the mom jeans are making a resurgence, in that the return is going to be good for womankind. Fallon states that with the return of these styles, there will be a new wave of body acceptance and positivity, meaning that the natural form will be celebrated and the goal of making your body look thin as possible with the help of low-rise style will be no more. People at this point were just kind of fed up with the unrealistic standard of the early 2000s, and these pants coming into style made fashion just so much more accessible for everybody. Mom jeans also gained some traction this year, and I think there was two reasons for this. The first one, thrifting and reusing clothes. Most people who were teens in the 2010s had parents who were young in the 90s, where the mom jean got their name. So if your parent had kept any of their old clothing, you just uncovered an amazing vintage find. The idea of having something that's truly vintage and also have a personal connection to is a really great feeling for oneself. It helps foster a feeling of being unique and also connected with the generations before you. I think that mom jeans are just also super comfortable. For this next fashion trend, while I was looking back through all the fashion choices that I made through the years, the crazy pattern of 2015 is something that I am not keen to see again. In a Vogue article by Lilia Ramsey, she states, a slick back dress is sublime, but if an iPhone camera can't convey the scrumptious simplicity of it all, why bother? Colorful, more is more dressing looked great for the camera, and the 2010s were all about the photogenic dressing. This idea of wearing flashy clothes for Instagram is a great example about how much social media was going to start impacting our personal lives. I think one of the most obvious examples of people wearing clothes that are just really emulating what they're seeing online rather than what they'd be wearing in their usual life was the rise of boho chic as it was tied to Coachella. Because a lot of people weren't going to Coachella. A lot of people, like myself, were in Pennsylvania. Why are you wearing a flower crown and fringe boots while walking around the mall? It doesn't really make sense because that style didn't fit into the surroundings I was involved in. Doesn't mean it wasn't fun. People were really waiting to see what Vanessa Hudgens, the queen of Coachella, was gonna pop off with to get their fashion inspiration for the upcoming summer. And since every good outfit needs a great accessory, we have to talk about the flower crown. While most flower crowns were literally store-bought, it just kind of gave this persona that you were a carefree person and you love everyone. very reminiscent of the hippie era. While flower crowns have literally existed forever, they gained heavy popularization in the 70s. 70s is sort of synonymous with festival culture, and I think 2015 is also a little bit synonymous with festival culture, becoming one of the most talked about things on the internet. It was no surprise that people around the world wanted to dress for the occasion. 2016. Athleisure and the bomber jacket. As society shifts again, 2016 was the year that we saw the rise in athleisure. I don't know if it's a surprise or not, but athleisure is actually a very controversial topic. Some people hate it, some people will never let their oversized hoodies and sneakers go, and I must say I'm also a fan of athleisure. In 2016, I went into high school, and there was no fucking way that I was getting dressed up every day. Athleisure was my savior. But I would say the biggest contributing factor in the rise of athleisure was the push in society for this healthy fitness lifestyle. One of the primary factors propelling athleisure's popularity is the rise of health and wellness culture. As more people prioritized exercise, mindfulness, and overall well-being, the demand for clothing that supports these activities has risen. Clothing brands cater to this demand by offering attire suitable for a yoga class and a casual day out. In 2016, I was 15 years old in high school. In this stage of my life, I was in the uncomfortable, somewhat controversial stage of every woman's life, which is focusing way too much about your body. And so with that in mind, I began to watch a lot of fitness influencers and just generally health-conscious content. It's also important to note that the fitness industry is always going to be toxic, but we are moving away from the 2000s heroin chic look and more into the at-home BBL look. Thanks, Kim Kardashian. For a lot of people, hitting the gym was a must. So these athletic clothes needed to really blend seamlessly between work and play. But moving away from the slippery slope that is athleisure, I want to talk about the real star of 2015, and that is streetwear. Streetwear is a style that even if it's not necessarily trending or the most popular thing at the moment, it will always be worn. Any fashion fanatic will tell you that streetwear originated in two places, the skate and surf culture in LA and NYC, and the underground nightlife of Japan. However, even before this time, there was a very iconic person named Dapper Dan, a designer from Harlem who gained notoriety for selling branded clothing to athletes and rappers alike. He also began the trend that we know now as Logo-mania that is still extremely prevalent in fashion today. Even though I didn't participate a ton in streetwear fashion of 2016, there was one clothing trend that I definitely participated in, and that was the bomber jacket. The bomber jacket was like the final boss of the military-inspired clothing that we saw a lot throughout the 2010s. There was a lot of army jackets and combat boots, but the bomber jacket was different. While army jackets and combat boots kind of fell more into the Tumblr aesthetic, the bomber jacket was a streetwear staple. Where we saw the rise of the bomber jacket, I feel almost certain is attributed to the music that we listened to in 2016. From my research, 2016 was the first year where we saw a majority of the most popular artists at the time being rap, hip-hop, R&B inspired. So it makes sense that our clothing reflected that. In the 90s, bomber jackets were a staple of style for many rap and hip-hop artists at the time. So when our top artists of 2016 pay homage to the artists who inspire them, we are inspired by them as well. So while being a 15-year-old girl in Pennsylvania, you would be right to assume that I don't have much personal connection to rap artists of the 90s. However, being a hip-hop fan in 2016, I was inadvertently inspired by these artists, some of whom I've never even listened to. 2016 is a very reminiscent time for me, and thank God for that because it has a fucking great soundtrack. In 2017, loud designer clothing took hold of the fashion scene, and even more prevalent were fake loud designer clothing. Once upon a time, counterfeit designer goods were a fashion no-go. Buying a fake piece of clothing or accessory was associated with a try-hard attitude and an empty pocket. But times have changed. Recently, some of the most influential runway designers have created cringeworthy, definitely not real clothes and accessories. As the fashion patterns usually follow, people are now beginning to imitate the runway styles. So this means fake designer clothing was everywhere. While I'm not going to dive into the argument of you need to buy the real thing or no, it's okay, buy a knockoff, I do want to talk about how seeing the rise of influencers wearing unapologetically branded expensive clothing was one of the first signs of how extreme influencer wealth was negatively infecting us as a society. I wish this wasn't my point of reference right now, but to remind you what 2017 was like. 2017 was when Jake Paul came out with Everyday Bro running around his mega Team 10 mansion. while influencers had existed for many years before 2017. In my opinion, 2017 was when the average person began to take them more seriously, and were wanting to strive for their unattainable lifestyles. So what does the regular person do when they see their famous influencer running around with a $10,000 shirt? They buy a fake one. It's sort of like when you see a person carrying around a book that's clearly never been opened, but they just want to portray the idea that they are very smart and intellectual. People do that same thing, but with money and luxury. And I do not blame people for wanting to be perceived as wealthy. It is simply a side effect of when you're bombarded by content and seeing people live these extravagant lives that you would want a piece of the cake. However, it does make me somewhat sad. It just shows how much pressure that we put on ourselves to live up to these unrealistic expectations that are pushed through our little screens on our phone. I can't lie and say that at a point in time I wasn't going to the mall and see these expensive designer bags and just dreaming of one day having one. But I don't think that it was necessarily because I was loving the style at the time. I think it was because I wanted to have that superiority that these bags and clothing give. In 2017, we also saw popularity of a trend that was sort of like the complete opposite of the branded Gucci shirt style, and that was the hipster retro chic look. This one I definitely participated in. There was a lot of influence at this time from the 70s with bold colors, sort of blocky looking clothing, wearing crop shirts with the high-waisted pants. And so at this time that honestly spanned trends even further than just the retro chic hipster look was the Adidas Superstar. Originating in the 70s as a low-top basketball shoe, the Superstar has evolved over time, but honestly not very much. The shell toe and the stripes on the side are just such a classic look that was so easily distinguishable from a lot of the other shoes that were out at the time, and it just really gave this retro feel that a lot of people were craving. Personally for me, I think it rose from Tumblr and YouTubers I was watching that they were very into vinyl and, having record players, listening to old music, and if you're gonna have a record player, you might as well match the part. But yeah, I think a lot of people just wanted to present with this indie style without necessarily being alternative and wearing dark muted tones, just because the trend of 2014 had just recently left, so it was unlikely that we would see a resurgence of the grunge. So instead, people went for a lighter, more playful era like the 70s. 2018, Fashion Nova and the fanny pack. Fast fashion has landed, and we are still currently suffering from it. In 2018, Fashion Nova was the most Googled brand of the year. More than Gucci, which just the year before was running the Google searches, more than Yeezy, which Kanye was extremely popular at the time. For some context, Fashion Nova was an extremely popular fast fashion brand due to its social media presence and the heavy collaboration with a lot of influencers at the time. Again, here we're seeing the impact that the social media influencer is having on the regular person, but instead of people trying to mimic their favorite influencers by buying fakes, they could buy the exact same item so that they could fit in perfectly with their favorite influencer. For me, 2018 was a lot of tight jeans and tube tops. I would say this was definitely influenced by Fashion Nova because Fashion Nova kind of created what I would call the baddie era. Being older in high school now, I was yearning to be thought of hot by the boys around me. And a lot of the Fashion Nova Shein styles were a lot of tight-fitting, a little bit sexy clothing. So it made me want to order these clothes so I could impress the people around me. While I understand that fast fashion can be good for accessibility because there's inclusive sizing and also offer a range of prices, it also encourages overconsumption because of the low cost. In 2018 is where I think the try-on haul, which included an excessive amount of clothing, was born. The try-on hauls encouraged buying a whole entire new wardrobe with the change of every season. And influencers were happy to push this idea as it gave them a great, consistent sponsor. While I don't know if anyone could predict what the try-on haul was going to spur in the years to come, I believe it was definitely a part of the downfall of the quality of clothing that we're seeing today. With trend cycles moving faster and faster, we were beginning to see the diminishment of generational fashion styles and trends. When a person goes through a thrift store and finds a very large jacket with humongous shoulder pads, we can think, ew, why the fuck did they make these in the 70s? Now, I feel almost lucky when I can really pinpoint a trend that has happened since 2018. Now to a very fun piece of clothing, we're going to talk about the fanny pack. The origins of the fanny pack stretch back more than 5,000 years, with one of the earliest instances being gear of the Iceman Otzi. Discovered in the Italian Alps, Otzi's mummified remains were accompanied by a belt and pouch, which historians believe was used to carry his tools and essentials. It's a little funny to me that one of the longest standing fashion trends that we're seeing on this list is literally the fanny pack. The fanny pack also has, I think, like the furthest reach of the type of people who participated in the trend. Literally from the fashion girlies to your grandpa, everyone was strapped up with a fanny pack at this time. Leading up to 2019, accessories were getting smaller and smaller. So the fanny pack really popping off at this time is not surprising whatsoever. Fashion at the time was still holding really true to the minimalist look. It's also very convenient. You literally just strap the pack onto your body and you don't have to think about it again. Fanny packs were also a staple of the 90s, something that I've talked about numerous times in this video already. In the 90s, they were typically nylon and colorful, which is a bit different than what we saw in 2018, but I think the version we saw in 2018 suited the minimalistic look that has been carried throughout the years so far. It's very funny how fashion repeats itself, because there was definitely a time where I would see a picture of my mom wearing a fanny pack and I would have been like, fucking loser. And then in 2018, I was wearing one. Being a freshman in college now, I moved 8 hours away from everything I know completely alone. It was safe to say that some soul and fashion searching definitely occurred in my freshman year of college, as I was beginning to meet new people and listen to new music and go to new places. 2019 was also the year that my life became to be much more serious. Not only because I was a young adult in a new city where I had to take care of myself, but it was apparent by the events that happened in 2019 that I could no longer run around just thinking I'm a kid. I feel it necessary to talk about the intersection of fashion and politics. While fashion has always been political, in 2019 to 2021, it was especially prevalent how important it was. While I have always tried to be knowledgeable about politics and social issues, in 2019 was when I really got serious about it. And while I'm still learning, as we all are, I wanted to focus on some important statements that were made from 2019 to 2021. Access to the press, governmental bodies, or educational institutions is a variable, but everyone has access to their own bodies. Fashion is, thus, one of the most readily available political tools. Even the decision to not care about fashion is a political statement. Earlier I mentioned how fashion is a uniform for your personality and interests. Well, politics fits into that. As much as it pains me to admit, MAGA hats are one of the best examples of how fashion can be an indicator of your personal beliefs and personality, and is an extremely useful tool to signal the people around you who might align with you politically as well. Fashion is one of the most subtle, least subtle ways that you can make a statement to the world. I think we forget how much power we as people can have to make a statement without even doing that much work. While you may not want to dress like it all the time, you have the ability to wear clothing that can act as a walking billboard for your thoughts and beliefs. You can use it to maybe influence or enrage or comfort the people around you, and I think that's extremely powerful. While I'm not going to talk about the MAGA hat, I do want to talk about some fashion statements that occurred from 2019 to 2021 that I think really exemplify this point. In 2019, Kristen Leah Sinema's swearing-in look was heavily feminine with elements of pin-up style, which is symbolic of the LGBTQ community. Sinema is the first openly bisexual senator. While it's not an overt message, you can feel the power in this photograph. When you think of the traditional person in politics, this photo won't come to mind. She's signaling to anyone who can read it that she represents the LGBTQ people and their rights. And if she can confidently look Mike Pence in the face, it reminds us all that we have power in our personal expression as well. Another fashion political statement of 2019 was at the Met Gala. Jean Raymond protested gentrification by encouraging Black communities to pool their money and buy back the block. Some people were surprised by the lack of political statements made in 2019 due to the theme being camp. However, Lena Waithe, who created The Shy, took the opportunity to remind us that Black drag queens invented camp. The Met Gala is a massive stage to get messages across. While the statements will almost always be met with backlash, it only gives the messaging more traction, which hopefully will lead to people positively engaging with it in the end. In 2020, clothing worn by protesters were the leading example of politics and fashion. With COVID having restricted a lot of our stages like the Met Gala, the most important place to look was on the streets and news. The Black Lives Matter movement was a leading force. The sense of urgency among Black people has been encapsulated in the slogan t-shirt, in some ways the unofficial uniform of today's activists. This has led us into 2021, where again we're back at the Met Gala. But this time, many more people decided to use their time in the spotlight to highlight their political message and beliefs. AOC, a representative of New York's congressional district, stirred a lot of conversation by wearing a Tax the Rich painted dress. Some find this decision distasteful, as she was at an event where a plate cost $20,000. But regardless of how you feel about it, she created a conversation that is still talked about today through the medium of fashion. Shifting gears now. Due to the new exposure I was experiencing, my style changed a lot. However, I always found a way to bring cargo pants into whatever outfit I was wearing. Fun fact, someone stole my cargo pants out of the dryer whenever I was a freshman in college. They stole it out of the hot fucking dryer. Like, that is so despicable. Regardless, cargo pants were the newest rendition of the military-styled clothing that we saw throughout the 2010s. Cargo pants have been very transformative throughout history. Going back to the 90s, cargo pants were slowly moving into the fashion scene along with Dickies due to their popularity in the skate and hip-hop scene. In the late 90s, we finally saw cargo pants hit the runway. Cargo pants, in my opinion, are a very clear example of streetwear influencing runways and rather than the other way around, which is something I really like. Slowly we progress through the timeline again and we've hit the 2000s, which are responsible for the cargo pants that we often see today. Groups like Destiny's Child and the Spice Girls were often seen spotted wearing these cargo pants, due to their association with the hip-hop genre and the type of dance these groups typically did. By 2019, we had also almost fully moved away from the skinny jean look and had accepted baggier, more wide-legged pants as the new norm. 2020. TikTok fashion. E-girl versus cottagecore. I find this year particularly interesting because it made the hypothetical idea, what would you do if nobody was watching, into reality. Well, sort of no one. While everyone was trapped inside, there was not much to do except for scroll on TikTok for hours on end. While this rotted our brain, it also inspired millions of people to get really creative with themselves, their fashion, their art, especially since they didn't have to face the usual forms of judgment that come from the peers around you. Instead, they really only had to face the judgment of the people that their OOTD fashion landed on. Let's start with the e-girl, electronic girl, internet girl. This fashion was cyber-inspired with a lot of muted tones and stripes. The term e-girl originally originated in the early 2000s, used in a way typically to describe someone who was pining for men's approval online. Now it's sort of shifted in its definition, while I definitely think it still has some of those ties with the use of the word. Instead, now it's usually just used to describe someone who's into video games, chronically online, likes alternative music, and typically wears heavy makeup. And that person could be all or only one of the above. We don't have to go that far back in history to see that part of this aesthetic stems from 2013 to 2015's sad girl Tumblr aesthetic. A lot of the clothing worn at that time and this time was very similar, except now the cyber element was way more prevalent because we're on the internet, duh. Like most trends on this list, we're going back to the 90s, except we're not going to be looking at the typical grunge style I've been referencing in a lot of these trends. Instead, we're going to talk about how the e-girl is a direct descent of the Harajuku fashion style. While there are many different variations of Harajuku, the e-girl was kind of a combination of all of them. Where this umbrella term comes from is the famous Fruits magazine, founded in 1997. Fruits focus on photographing stylish people around Harajuku. A version of Harajuku style originated with online gaming, and the e-girl aesthetic also originated with online gaming. So while the Harajuku style has a lot of different variations of it, I think it's very obvious to see that a lot of 2020 e-girl elements were sort of picked between the micro aesthetics of Harajuku. Now the other end of the spectrum is cottagecore. Being stuck at home, people flocked to this trend, as it evoked a romanticized version of simpler times, with fashion pieces that tended to feature more embroidery, vintage elements, and styles that seemed like they could be homemade. You didn't have to be a traditional person to find comfort in the simple life. If a person's gonna try their hand at making bread for the first time, it makes sense that they would want to fit the part. Cottagecore, originating from 19th century European style, contained a lot of flowy dresses, brown and green, a lot of neutral tones, and a lot of flowers. While this style has been along forever, the term cottagecore was first coined in 2018 on Tumblr. But aside from the rise in homemaking, there was another very influential element that came into play in 2020. Even if you're a certified Swiftie or not, you cannot deny the impact that folklore had on the cottagecore aesthetic. To try to put it more poetically, it feels like we're standing on the edge of the folklorian woods and had a choice, to turn and go back or travel further into the forest of this music. Like I said in the beginning of this video, wearing the cottagecore aesthetic was a way to fit into the Swiftie community. And even if you weren't a Swiftie, wearing this aesthetic gave the impression that you were a very soft and whimsical person. Overall, these two aesthetics and everything between at the time gave the person that was stuck at home the opportunity to join a community. 2021, Y2K is back. Actually, more like McBling. Okay, we've been dancing around Y2K. We've gotten so close we can almost touch it, but haven't really dived all the way in. Even though we've seen a lot of Y2K elements in the years previously, I wouldn't say that Y2K was back until 2021. While the pandemic was still in swing in 2021, consumers gravitated toward familiarity and the comfort of childhood nostalgia, found rummaging through their parents' closets and sorting through racks of clothing at Goodwill, or splurging on rare Depop finds. Gen Z spent the last year rediscovering vintage gems from past eras. Since the beginning of the pandemic, thrifting saw a sharp increase in popularity, and it came with the rise of Y2K fashion. Y2K was different this time though. Back in the actual early 2000s, this style relied on a very futuristic look, but now it's 10 years later, so what do we do with the idea of a futuristic look that hasn't really come true, and also it's like not the future, but it is the future, but it's like weird. This required anyone who wanted to participate in the Y2K trends to just kind of mash some like 2020 trends in like a futuristic look and just like see what came out. The thing is, I really love true Y2K futurism. The idea of wearing something that's supposed to be futuristic but then is now outdated is just so beautiful to me. Futurism will never actually be realistic, at least what we see in the past. Like, I don't think we'll ever see that style actually being worn, but it still creates this fun costumey escapist look. Futurism has its roots in Milan in 1909 by Italian poet and editor Filippo Tommaso Marinetti. This art style gained traction over time, and those who participated stood to abolish all forms of symmetry, instead embracing sporadic geometric patterns, garnished colors, and common textures that had never been formally utilized in the context of fashion. Plastic and metal, for example. While the idea of futuristic fashion that was held in 1909 is different from what we saw in Y2K, it makes sense that futurism would come into play in 2021, as literally everyone was just looking toward the future and not wanting to be present in the moment. And if you're still kind of confused what 2000s futurism really is, watch Xenon, the Girl of the 21st Century. It's a Disney movie and it is so good. Anyways, what style most people were wearing in 2021 was actually the McBling fashion. In the early 2000s, artists like Missy Elliott, LL Cool J, and Eve helped popularize tracksuits, matching sets, blinged out accessories, and colorful streetwear. Stars like Paris Hilton and Nicole Richie helped popularize this aesthetic, wearing graphic tees and tracksuits on the street and on screen in their show, The Simple Life. McBling is really fun, and it's also a form of escapism. This aesthetic is pushed by luxury and materialism. We often see this trend in society. As the people get poorer, the desire for wealth and luxury just increases. Similar to the early 2000s when the US was in economic downturn, 2021 also followed a similar trend. Well, in the early 2000s, we had reality TV stars to show off their unattainable lives that we wish we had. Now in 2021, we have TikTok stars to show off their unattainable lives that we wish we had. The flashiness and colors of it all really sparks nostalgia in my brain, where I just want to wear a little baby tee and put on my bedazzled clothing and just walk around and have fun. Slowly beginning to come out of the pandemic, I think everyone just wanted to take tequila shots with their girls and dance in the club, and that is pretty much the epitome of Y2K fashion. 2022, low-rise jeans and ballet core. Sometimes fashion history repeating itself can be amazing. It can bring fun trends and even better style. And sometimes it's detrimental to society. Also, slight trigger warning here, we're going to be talking about body image in a little bit more of an intense way. Only a few years ago, we were beginning to accept the body positivity and body neutrality movements. Now it seems like we're going back to ground zero. Low-rise jeans and ballet core are still on the rise and gaining popularity today. While these clothes aren't bad, like they're literally just pieces of clothing, it's the culture surrounding these communities that is really detrimental to us as a society. Ballet core is founded on the toxic ballet culture that encourages disordered eating and being as small as possible, and low-rise jeans are almost synonymous with early 2000s magazines body shaming any woman that they could get a picture of to call them fat. While maybe we could have been more hopeful that this time around the trend cycle wouldn't move back to putting immense pressure on being skinny to be fashionable, sadly society disappoints us again. There seems to be this constant battle in fashion where the idea is like fashion is for everyone, while also holding the idea that the best fashion is very exclusive and can only be worn by certain people. While it's been a long time and there have been great advancements made, it still seems that we haven't moved past the societal concept that to be fashionable is to be thin. Runways and campaigns speak for themselves. Yes, there's more diversity than the early 2000s, but I still don't think we're at the point where inclusion is the normative idea, and instead it's still seen as an additive to help the brand appear more woke. To round out this point, these clothes aren't inherently bad. It's the connotation that you have to be a size 0 to wear them that is bad. That's no new information, and it's easier said than done to wear something that could cause you to be shamed or uncomfortable. However, when you detach yourself from the idea that everything you wear has to be flattering, then you can start to really get creative. You're not a mannequin in the store. Your clothes can exist as an art piece or statement, a mode of expression. 2023. Everything is categorized now. Soft girl core, quiet luxury, Barbie core, corporate core, old money aesthetic, Europe core, mermaid core, coquette, coastal cowgirl, bimbo core, blockette. Is it even possible to say that there was a distinct trend of this year? It really seems like everyone was just throwing shit at the wall and seeing what sticks. In some ways, the pace of these trends kind of opened the way that, like, if nothing is fashionable, then everything is fashionable. Except that's a little bit too optimistic for the way that most people react to wearing clothes that are not trendy anymore. In 2018, I mentioned how fast fashion was really beginning to affect us as a society with our fashion choices, but now I'm going to talk about how TikTok really threw the match to start the fire that is fast fashion literally taking over the world. The pipeline begins with short-form content destroying the viewer's ability to focus on something for longer than a few minutes. This wasn't only shortening our attention spans, but it was also making it much easier for our opinions to shift and change at the drop of a hat. It's rare videos on TikTok present the watcher with the whole idea or concept of something. So after this person's decision is made for them on something they would like to buy, they go to TikTok shop and bam. Now it's promptly delivered to your house. Ugh, but wait, said creator I bought the shirt from just made a video of how they can never believe they dress like that. And now they're into the opposite of what you just bought and promote some new piece of clothing and the cycle continues. It's like being in middle school when you're like begging and pleading the universe to give you the perfect pair of shoes that you're just convinced will make you finally feel popular, cool, that you'll fit in. But then you get the shoes and you don't feel that way. And it's painful and it takes all the fun out of fashion. So with that all in mind, let's talk about the microtrend. Microtrends differ quite drastically from subcultures, which traditionally came with not only an aesthetic but a broader value system. Throughout the years, fashion subcultures have organically evolved, fueled by shared interests in music, literature, art, or political ideas, particularly within youth communities. And I think this is why microtrends feel so disingenuous. There's nothing authentic tying the person who participates in these trends to the trend. Even throughout the course of this video, we could see a few years back how you could literally trace exactly where a style, trend, or aesthetic was coming from. Trends in the past were used as signifiers to let the public know what that person liked in music or maybe their political ideas. And instead now it just feels like it boils down to I want to look hot or cool. So why does this matter? Because why should we care about literally anything, fashion including, if there's no backing behind it? I don't think it's wrong to want credibility for the clothing that I'm being pushed to buy. While these microtrends might have good elements to them, without lived experience or meaning behind them, it leaves us with anything but great style. 2024. Brat summer? We're now leaving 2024, and what's left behind is a lot of clothes with no discernible place in anyone's closet. However, I don't want to end this video on a sour note, so I'm going to put my rants to rest for now, and let's talk about some 2024 fashion trends I was into, and also just some that were popular throughout the year. While Brat Summer was somehow a cultural movement and also a meme built on Charli XCX's album Brat, people around the world were joining in to wear their neon green and white wife beaters, accessorizing with futuristic glasses and chunky silver jewelry, all in the name of Brat. Pop is on the rise, and I think we can expect more pop fashion styles to be integrated into our fashion next year. Personally, I was also big into the mini shorts this year, reminiscent of the indie sleaze era. I love layering tights, and that was so popular at the time. Also this winter, the faux fur I've been seeing in a lot of micro trends does deserve some flowers. Something about wearing fur just feels so glamorous and cozy. Overall, I think the point I wanted to make is that I think it's important to reflect on the trends of the past and things we might see as outdated now. Because there's usually, not always, good reason they were popular in the first place. Our personal style shouldn't be dependent on TikTok trends and the internet's algorithm. And honestly, I think the best way to curate a personal style that you truly love is to stop looking for the most unique, rare pieces that only you have and only you wear, looking for any type of clothing that'll help you stand out in this world, but instead find clothes that can help you find an authentic community to fit into. Alright, that was a whole lot of fucking yapping. If anyone made it through this whole video, thank you, and leave some opinions down below on your favorite era, your favorite clothing, your favorite trends, literally anything. Also, I'm sorry I sound like shit. I've been so sick and I needed to get this done before the new year. But yeah, this is my first time making a sort of deep dive analysis video. I do want to do more in the future, but also I make fun little silly videos if you want to check some of those out. This was a lot of fun. This was a lot of research. I hope this helped you have a better perspective on how you should think about fashion and just yourself in general. Happy 2025.